Well, the FBI has opened an investigation into allegations of money laundering related to the Malaysian State Investment Fund, 1MDB. The scope of the investigation is not yet clear, but it is the latest in a series of international investigations related to the fund. 1MDB was set up by the Prime Minister Najib Razak in 2009 to help drive the economy. It is now having difficulty repaying more than $11 billion of debt, and he faces accusations of personally accumulating up to $700 million through the fund. We're going live now to Amrita Malhi at the University of South Australia's International Centre for Muslim and Non-Muslim Understanding. Amrita, thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps
no problem.
It would be a good idea to get a sense of 1MDB. What was it set up and supposed to do?
Well, it was set up initially as a state-led fund that's supposed to be able to lead national infrastructure development, for example, public transport. There was a desalination plant, I recall, and there's also been a few property investments along the way. There's been a large number of investments along the way. And apparently its problem is that it has got itself in quite a lot of debt as a result of some of these investments.
And how was the money raised?
Well, initially it was a state fund. So Terengganu is an oil-rich state on the east coast of Malaysia. There's a lot of natural gas off the coast as well. And so it was a profitable fund that was ultimately nationalised. And so it's also got quite an international footprint, which is how come there are so many scandals linked to foreign bank accounts and foreign funds through which 1MDB funds seem to have passed, which is how come the FBI has got involved now.
Indeed. So, of course, the Prime Minister has become embroiled in this because he is said to have received $700 million somehow through this fund, although he claims that it in fact came through international donations. How, first of all, how do we understand, or how is it understood in Malaysia that he came by all this money?
Well, it's pretty much contested. I mean, obviously, the Prime Minister's own explanation is that it was a donation from someone wealthy, a wealthy donor in the Middle East who supports his ruling party, UMNO, and who wants to see it do well. Now, that obviously is debated and contested. For example, there's a movement for electoral reform called Beverley that led quite a large rally a few weekends ago. Possibly up to 100,000 people rallied in KL and also around the Malaysian diaspora around the world. Because they argue that actually there needs to be a better and more detailed investigation into what happened with the 1MDB funds. And also they argue that there was an investigation along these lines in Malaysia that was shut down. There were a number of staff taken out of the investigation, so the Attorney General was swapped, for example. And in fact, the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission was also raided by police. So there are allegations that there's been a cover-up and that it isn't being investigated properly at all, which again is why these international authorities have ended up involved, because it seems that there are people, members of UMNO, Najib's own party, for example, who are attempting to internationalise the issue and internationalise the debate. And I think that's partly because they feel that it hasn't been able to be resolved through the Malaysian system and through its structures and its authorities.
And Amrita, that's such a good point you make, because once the FBI gets involved, as it has now, we understand, becomes a much harder for Najib Razak to try and keep himself distanced from the scandal that has embroiled 1MDB.
Well, it could possibly become a little more difficult for him, although it's not very clear what the FBI is actually investigating just yet, and they aren't making any comments. Although on Friday, I think it was, there was a member of UMNO, formerly a division chief inside the ruling party, who was attempting to, I think, make preparations to get ready to go to the US, apparently to talk to the FBI, or that's what he's saying anyway. And so he was stopped and he was put on a no-travel list. And so he's making allegations that he's a whistleblower who's been stopped from, going out and talking about the problem. Although I noticed the FBI has been saying that he didn't really have an appointment booked in with them. So exactly what he's doing is still unclear. So there's a lot of this that needs to come out yet.
So as a bit of politicisation, as you suggest. So there's the $700 million that Najib Razak has accounted for in his terms, but not in many of the opposition parties' terms. The rest of the money, was there a lot of money flowing into this fund from foreign international companies? What sort of, which sort of countries were investing in this?
Well, this is not a matter of any great certainty or clarity. There have been a lot of transactions around the place. There's been, funds transferred into an international petroleum investment corporation, and just now there's some discussion over where some of that money has gone. So there's a long story about a Cayman Islands investment and other government bonds that were going to be given to this fund, and then they were going to be bought back, and then there was going to be some kind of transfer. And in the process of all of that, some of the money is unaccounted for. And so that's some of the detail that some of the authorities are trying to pick through. And I assume the FBI is going to be looking at, because at some point some money was transferred through a couple of US bank accounts. And exactly where and what and how is still a matter of, some mystery, at least to me.
Indeed, yes, quite a web. Really good to get some clarity on it all. Thanks so much for joining us.
You're welcome.